Well, after subjecting you, my audience, to uh, 15 episodes of dense Italian left communism, I decided to cover something that wasn't even necessarily all that super left. I wanted to cover AI because recently, as you may know, my day job is I'm a teacher. Yes, I have a day job. YouTube is not my day job. I think having YouTube as your day job has a lot of bad incentives. Um, but anyway, and I went to an unnamed massive educational conference and dealt with a lot of the attempts to use AI in education. And some of it was promising, but most of it was not. There were a lot of oversells, like, and I heard people say, well, teachers didn't care about cheating till A, which is not true. Another thing that was not true that was commonly said was, we have for the first time something other than humans that can critically think. Also not true, not even true before AI, but our large language learning models anyway. I'm really hesitant to call it artificial intelligence because I'm not sure that it actually works like an intelligence. Nonetheless, as a person who does think that it could have some limited use potential for productivity, it's obviously made coding a lot easier if people are a lot more dependent on services that do that for them, and thus the corporations that provide them. I'm pretty skeptical of a lot of the big claims of revolutionizing the economy. I just haven't seen a lot of the evidence yet. Well, apparently I'm not the only one. So I found a couple of articles that I'm going to intersperse in my queue over the next couple of weeks by Edward Zitron on the implications of this tech economy. And we're going to start with AI, with the new thing from Ed called pop culture. I strongly suggest that you subscribe to Ed Citron's newsletter. Anyway. A week and a half ago, Goldman Sachs put out a 31-page report titled Gen AI, Too Much Spent, Too Little Benefit. And I want to point out, this is a few months after an April report where Goldman Sachs was very optimistic on AI. That included some of the most damning literature on generative AI I've ever seen. And yes, that sound you hear is the slow deflation of the bubble I've been warning you about since March. These are links to this podcast if you want to check that out. And have we an essay he wrote called "Have We Peaked AI?" The report covers AI's productivity advancements, which Goldman Sachs remarks are likely limited, AI's returns, which are likely to be significantly more limited than anticipated, and AI's power demands, which are likely to be so significant that utility companies have to spend nearly 40% more in the next 3 years to keep up with the demand from hyperscalers like Google and Microsoft. This report is so significant because Goldman Sachs, like any investment bank, does not care about anyone's feelings unless doing so is profitable. Absolutely. Goldman Sachs is ruthless. It will gladly hype anything it thinks will make a buck. But back in May, it was claimed that AI, not just generative AI, was showing very positive signs of boosting the GDP and productivity. That's the same report that I mentioned. Said it was in April. I guess it was in May. Even though said report buried within it constant reminders that AI had yet to impact productivity growth, and states that only about 5% of companies reporting using generative AI in regular production. In teaching, we're trying to use it. It's not great. Students also don't know how to use it. They think it produces cogent essays, but it often doesn't understand the prompts, and students will use it to answer personal questions. Whole thing's bad. Now, of course, that also reflects on the education system being so banal and having such low standards that no one has any stakes in it anymore. That's a whole different discussion. But that's part of why this has been so emperor's wearing no clothes, like so many things in our society. It doesn't just reflect on the technology, it also reflects on the social fabric that is producing the technology and how broken it is as well. But let's continue. For Goldman to suddenly turn on the AI movement suggests that it is extremely anxious about the future of generative AI, with almost everybody agreeing on one core point. The longer this tech takes to make people money, the more money it's going to need to make. The report includes an interview with economist Darren Akamalu of MIT, an institute professor who published a paper back in May called The Simple Microeconomics of AI that argued the upside of the US productivity and consequently GDP growth from generative AI will likely prove much more limited than the forecasters expect. A month has only made Akamalu's more pessimistic, declaring that truly transformative change won't happen quickly, and few, if any, will likely occur within the next 10 years. And that generative AI's ability to affect global productivity is low because many of the tasks that humans currently perform are multifaceted and require real-world interaction, which AI won't be able to materially improve anytime soon. Yeah. What makes this interview and this paper so remarkable is how thoroughly and aggressively it attacks every bit of the marketing collateral the AI movement has. Asimoglu, I think, specifically questions the belief that AI models will simply get more powerful as we throw more data and GPU capacity at them, and specifically asks the question, what does it mean to double AI's capacities? How does that actually make something like, say, a consumer rep service better? And the specific problem with AI fantasy spiel, they heavily rely on the idea that not only will these large language models get more powerful, but they will get more powerful, will somehow grant it the power to do something. As Asimoglu says, what does it mean to double AI's capabilities? No, really, what does more actually mean? While one might argue that it will mean faster generative processes, there is really no barometer for what better looks like. And perhaps that's why ChatGPT, Claude, and other LLMs have yet to take a leap beyond being able to generate stuff. Anthroplic's Claude LLM might be best in class, but that only means it's faster and more accurate, which is cool, but is not the future or revolutionary or even necessarily good. I should add that these are the questions I and other people writing about AI should have been asking the whole time. Generative AI generates outputs based on text-based inputs and requests. The requests can be equally specific and intricate, and the answer is always, as obvious as it sounds, generated fresh, meaning there is no actual knowledge or indeed intelligence operating in any part of the process. Yeah, I've thought that too. There's no memory capacity. There's no interaction with processing and memory. All right. So the generative AI is just using like everything that's already in there as its memory bank, but it's not learning from accessing its own memories. That's not how human intelligence works. It also has other problems that I've seen. It is given towards a positivity bias. It has no engineering towards efficiency at all. It has other biases programmed into it, and it replicates the biases of the general internet, which is this database. Think the replication crisis, but on crack. I should add that these are questions, and other people are writing about AI shouldn't have been asking me the whole time. I already read that. As a result, it is easy to see how this gets better, but far, far harder, if not impossible, to see how generative AI leads to any further than where we're already at. How does GPT, a transformer-based model that generates answers probabilistically, as in what next part of the generation is most likely to be the correct one, based entirely on training data, do anything more than generate paragraphs of occasionally accurate text? How do any of these models even differentiate when most of them are trained on the same training data that they're running out of? Yeah, by the way, I even heard this at the education tech conference I went to. they are running out of training models for some of these things. The training data is one that doesn't get enough attention, but it's sufficiently dire that it has the potential to halt or dramatically slow any AI development in the near future. As one paper published in the journal Computer Vision and Pattern Recognition found, in order to achieve linear improvement in model performance, you need an exponentially larger amount of data. Exponentially larger amount of data. So you need more and more internet. But as people use AI to generate the internet, it's not useful for that. Or to put another way, each additional step becomes increasingly and exponentially more expensive to take. This was also true with quantum computing, by the way, guys. This infers a steep financial cost, not merely in obtaining the data, but also the compute required to process it. I think that's supposed to be computer. With the Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei saying the AI models currently in development will cost as much as $1 billion to train, and within 3 years we may see the models that cost as much as $10 or $100 billion are roughly 3 times the GDP of Estonia. Agamalu doubts that LLMs can become superintelligence, and that even his most conservative estimates of productivity gains may turn out to be too large if AI models proved less successful in improving upon more complex tasks. And I think that's really the root of the problem. All of this excitement, every second of breathless hype that has been built on this idea that the intelligence industry, led by generative AI, will somehow revolutionize everything from robotics to the supply chain, despite the fact generative AI is not actually going to solve these problems because it isn't built to do so. And I think that's actually really important. It can help with things like coding, even bad at math. The things that AI is good and bad at is actually seemingly arbitrary. I've seen lists, and it's weird. While Asimoglu has some positive things to say, for example, that AI models could be trained to help scientists conceive of and test new materials, which happened last year, his general verdict is quite harsh. That using generative AI and too much automation too soon could create bottlenecks and other problems for firms that no longer have the flexibility or troubleshooting capacities that human capital provides. In essence, replacing humans with AI might break everything if you're one of the bosses that doesn't actually know what the fuck they're talking about. The report also includes a palate cleanser for quirked up AI hype fiend on page 6, where Goldman Sachs' Joseph Briggs argues that generative AI will likely lead to significant economic upsides based on, and I shit you not, entirely on the idea that AI will replace workers in some jobs and then allow them to get jobs in other fields. Briggs also argues that the full automation of AI exposes tasks that are likely to occur over a horizon which can generate significant cost savings, which assumes that generative AI or AI itself will actually replace these tasks. I should also add that, unlike every other interview in this report, Briggs constantly mixes up AI and generative AI, and at one point suggests that recent generative AI advances are foreshadowing the emergence of a superintelligence. I included in this part of the report because sometimes, very rarely, I get somebody suggesting I'm not considering both sides. The reason I don't generally include both sides of this argument is that the AI hype generally makes arguments based on the assumption that things will happen, such as a transformer model that probabilistically generates the next part of a sentence, or a picture will somehow gain sentience. Francois Cholet, an AI researcher at Google, recently argued that LLMs can't lead to AGI, explaining in detail that models like ChatGPT are simply not capable of the kind of reasoning and theorizing that makes the human brain works. I'm going to add Chomsky said that. Cholet also notes that models specifically built to complete the task of the abstraction and reasoning corpus, a benchmark test for AI skills and true intelligence, are doing so because they've been fed millions of data points of people solving the test, which is kind of like measuring somebody's IQ based on them studying really, really hard to complete an IQ test, except even dumber. The reason I'm suddenly bringing up superintelligence, or AGI, artificial general intelligence, is because throughout every defense of generative AI is a deliberate attempt to get around the problem that generative AI doesn't really automate many tasks. What it's good at is generating answers or creating things based on a request. There is no real interaction with the task, or the person giving it the task, or the consideration of what the task will need, Gypsy abstraction of what is said to output generated. So what he's meaning there, there's not a consideration even of like trying to figure out model the mind of the person making the question, that it gets things said to it and it's trying to probabilistically predict based off of its large databases what language will be useful to come next. Tasks like taking someone's order or replacing and relaying it to the kitchen at a fast food restaurant might seem elementary to some people. I won't write a long essay, working in fast food sucks, but it isn't for the AI model that generates answers without really understanding the meaning of any of the words. Last year, Wendy's announced it would integrate generative fresh AI ordering system into some restaurants. And a few weeks ago, it revealed that the system requires human intervention on 14% of orders. On Reddit, one user noticed that Wendy's AI regularly required 3 attempts to get it to understand them, and it would cut you off if you weren't speaking fast enough. White Castle, which implemented a similar order system in partnership with Samsung and SoundHound, fared a little better, with 10% of orders requiring human intervention. Last month, McDonald's discounted its own AI ordering system, which it built with IBM and deployed to more than 100 restaurants, likely because it wasn't very good. I mean, it is McDonald's. Well, one customer rang up for literally hundreds of chicken nuggets. However, to be clear, McDonald's system wasn't based on generative AI. If nothing else, this illustrates the disconnect between those AI systems and how much, or rather how little, they understand the jobs they wish to eliminate. A little humility goes a long way. This is another problem here. Generally, automation in the past was automated by people who engineered it based off watching humans do the job. This kind of removes part of that step. It's just modeling it off of the language assumed humans would enter in this situation, as if that's the same as modeling the entirety of the work process. Not a good thing to do. Another thing to note is, on top of generative AI cocking up these orders, which you'd think would be relatively easy to get orders right, Wendy's still requires human beings to make the goddamn food. Despite all of this hype on all of the media attention and all of the incredible investment and all of these supposed innovations that don't seem capable of replacing the jobs that they're meant to. Not that I think they should, just that I'm tired of being told that the future is inevitable. The reality is that generative AI isn't good at replacing jobs, but commoditizing distinct acts of labor. Bing, bing, bing. All right. This is turning more of the labor act and labor power, this is my Marxism kicking in, into commodities to be sold, but at massive inefficient rates of fixed capital. And in the process, the early creative jobs that help people build portfolios to advance in their industries. The freelancers having their livelihoods replaced by the bosses using generative AI aren't being replaced so much as they are being shown how little respect many bosses have for their craft or for the customers that it allegedly serves. Absolutely. Copy editors and concept artists provide far more valuable work than any generative AI can. Yet, an economy dominated by managers who don't appreciate or participate in the labor means that these jobs are under assault from LLMs pumping out stuff that looks and sounds the same, to the point that copywriters are now being paid to help them sound more human. Yeah, by the way, people were really afraid that we wouldn't be able to tell AI written papers, and at first I was too. Within about 2 months, I can spot an AI written paper. It has even certain commonalities of words, and there's certain amounts of jargon that are just common to it. And I don't even need an AI burstiness test, which we also have, to check it. Now, I don't mind having kids use these kind of tools to help them polish their grammar off any more than I would mind them looking at a dictionary. But when they try to do the whole thing for them, they often don't even answer the question and aren't getting correct answers. Now, that's in my field, which generative AI should be really good at. It's got the entirety of the internet, but it's not. It'll often make up citations when it could have access to real ones. It just blows my mind. One fundamental misunderstanding of the bosses replacing these workers with generative AI is that you are not just asking for a thing, but you are outsourcing the risk and the responsibility. When I hire an artist to make a logo, my expectation is that they listen to me, then add their own flair. Then we go back and forth with drafts until I get something I like. I'm paying them not just for their time, their years of learning their craft and the output itself, but also to make the ultimate burden of production is not my own. And their experience means that they can adapt to the circumstances that I might not have thought of. These are not things you can train in a data set because they are derived from experiences inside and outside of the creative process, asterisks, and I'm going to add in a specific context of which LLMs can't tell. That's my addition there. Back to Ed here. While one can teach a generative AI what a billion images look like, AI does not get hand cramps or call at 8 p.m. saying that it needs to pop more. It does not have moods, nor can it infer from them written or visual media, because human emotions are extremely weird, as are our moods, our bodies, and our general existence. I realize all of this is a little flowery, but even the most mediocre copywriter is, on some level, a collection of experiences. And fully replacing any creative, so very likely, and fully replacing any creative is so very unlikely if you're doing it based on copying millions of pieces of someone else's work. The most fascinating part of the report, page 10, is an interview with Jim Covello, Goldman Sachs' head of global equity research. Covello isn't a name you have heard unless you are, for whatever reason, a big semiconductor head, but he's consistently been on the right side of history. Named the top semiconductor analyst to research for years, successfully catching the downturn in fundamentals and multiple major chip firms far before others did. And Jim, in no uncertain terms, thinks the generative AI bubble is full of shit. Covillo believes that combined expenditure of all parts of generative AI boom, data centers, utilities, and occupation, will cost trillions of dollars in the next several years. And asks one simple question: what trillion dollar problem will AI solve? He notes that replacing low-wage job with tremendously costly technology is basically the polar opposite of prior technology transitions he's witnessed in the last 30 years. Yeah, I mean, why would you place a low-wage job with a very expensive one-time purchase, fixed capital investment that also you're going to have to maintain? One particular myth Covello dispels in comparing generative AI to the early days of the internet, noting that nothing in its infancy, the internet was a low-cost technology solution that enabled e-commerce to replace costly incumbent solutions, and that AI technology is exceptionally expensive, and to justify those costs, the technology must be able to solve complex problems, which it isn't designed to do. Ouch. Covello also dismisses the suggestion that tech starts off expensive and gets cheaper over time as revisionist history, and that the tech world is too complacent in the assumption that AI costs will decline substantially over time. He specifically notes that the only reason that Moore's law was capable of enabling smaller, cheaper, faster chips was because competitors like AMD forced Intel and other companies to compete, a thing which doesn't really seem to be happening with NVIDIA, which nearly stranglehold the GPUs required to handle generative AI. While there are companies making GPUs aimed at the AI market, especially in China, where US trade restrictions prevent local companies from buying high-powered cards like the A100 for fears that they will be diverted to the military, they are doing so at the same scale. They're not doing so at the same scale, and Covillo notes that the market is too complacent about the certainty of cost declines. Basically, these groups are starting out and are going to maintain monopoly pricing in perpetuity, it looks like. He also notes that the costs are so high, even when they come down, they're likely to do so. They'd have to do so dramatically, and that a comparison with the early days of the internet, where businesses often relied on a $64,000 service for some microsystems, and there was no AWS, Linode, or Azure, pales in comparison to the cost of AI, and that even without including the replacement of the power grid, a necessity to keep this boom going. I don't think people understand how much AI takes in power. It's kind of obscene. And remember, just because it doesn't seem power intensive to you on the consumer end doesn't mean it isn't. I could probably write up Covello's entire interview because it's nasty. Covello adds up the common adage that people didn't think smartphones would be big was false. He sat through hundreds of presentations in the early 2000s, many of them including romance that accurately fit how smartphones rolled out, and there is no such rollmat or killer app for AI that has been found. He notes that big tech companies now have no choice but to engage in AI arms race given the hype, which will continue the trend of massive spending. And he believes that there are low odds of AI-related revenue expansion, in part because he doesn't believe that generative AI will make workers smarter, just more capable of finding better information faster, and that any advantages that generative AI gives you will be arbitraged away because the tech can be used everywhere, and thus you can't, as a company, raise prices. In plain English, yeah, this is actually an important point. Generative AI isn't making money for anybody because it doesn't actually make companies that use it any extra money. Efficiency is useful, but it is not company defining. He also adds that hyperscalers like Google and Microsoft will also garner incremental revenue from AI, not the huge returns that they are perhaps counting on, given the vast AI-related expenditure over the past 2 years. Like, this could be a bubble that really hurts the tech market really bad. Think metaverse, but worse. This is damning for many reasons, chief of which is the biggest thing that the artificial intelligence is meant to do is be smart and make you smarter. Being able to access information faster makes you better at your job, but that's efficiency rather than allowing you to do something new. Generative AI isn't creating new jobs, it's creating new ways to do your job, and it isn't making anybody any money, and the path to boosting revenues is unclear. Covello ends with another important and brutal note. The more time passes without significant AI applications, the more challenging the AI story will become, with corporate profitability likely floating this bubble as long as it takes for the tech industry to hit more difficult economic period. And he also adds his own prediction. Investor enthusiasm may begin to fade if important use cases don't start to become more apparent in the next 12 to 18 months. And I think he's being optimistic. While I won't recount the rest of the report, one theme brought up repeatedly is the idea that the American power grid is literally not ready for generative AI. Fuck, we're barely ready to hold the current infrastructure together, much less increasing our capacity by 40% for non-humans. In an interview, former Microsoft VP of the energy brain Janos, page 15, the report details numerous nightmarish problems that the growth of generative AI is causing the power grid, such as hyperscalers such as Microsoft, Amazon, and Google have increased their power demand a few hundred megawatts in the early 2010s to a few gigawatts by 2030. Enough to power multiple American cities. The centralization of data center operations for big tech companies in Northern Virginia may be potentially required to doubling of the grid capacity over the next decade. Utilities have not experienced a period of load growth, as a significant increase in power draw in nearly 20 years. In fact, we have a problem with that now, that because of weather instability. Are you going to imagine what that's going to mean here? Which is a problem because power infrastructure is slow to build, involves onerous permitting and bureaucratic measures to make sure that it's done properly. The total capacity of power projects waiting to connect the grid grew 30% in the last year, and wait times are 40 to 70 months. Expanding the grid is no quick or easy task, and that Mark Zuckerberg said the power constraints are the biggest thing in the way of AI, which is sort of true. In essence, on top of generative AI not having any killer apps, not meaningfully increasing productivity or GDP, not generating any revenue, not creating new jobs or massively changing existing industries, it also requires America to totally rebuild its power grid, which Janice regretfully adds the U.S. has kind of forgotten how to do. Perhaps Sam Altman's energy breakthrough could be these fucking AI companies being made to pay for the new power infrastructure. Ouch. Yeah, this is also a major free rider problem. You just see these tech building on public infrastructure that's already failing and just driving it into the ground. The reason I so agonizingly picked up the report, if Goldman Sachs is saying this, things are very, very bad. It also directly attacks the specific hype tactics of AI fanatics. The sense that generative AI will create new jobs, it hasn't in 18 months. The sense that cost will come down, they haven't, and there doesn't seem to be a path for them to do so in a way that matters. And then incredible demand for these, and that there's incredible demand for these products. There isn't, and there's no path for it existing. Even Goldman Sachs, when describing the efficient benefits of AI, added that while it might be able to create an AI that updated historical data in its company models more quickly than doing it so manually, it costs 6 times as much to do so. Ouch. The remaining defense is the one I find most annoying, that OpenAI has something we don't know about, a big, sexy secret technology that will eventually break the bones of every hater. Yet I have a counterpoint. No, it doesn't. Seriously. Mira Murati, CTO of OpenAI, said a few weeks ago that the models it has in its labs are not much more advanced than those that are publicly available. That's my answer to all of this. There is no magic trick. There is no secret thing that Sam Altman is going to reveal to us in a few months that makes me eat crow, or some magical tool that Microsoft or Google pops out that makes it all that's worth it. There isn't. I'm telling you there isn't. Generative AI, as I said back in March, is peaking. If it hasn't already peaked, it cannot do much more than it is currently doing, other than doing more of it faster than some new inputs. It isn't getting much more efficient. Sequoia hype man David Kahn gleefully mentioned in a recent blog that NVIDIA's B100 will have 1.5 times better performance for only 25% more cost, which doesn't mean a goddamn thing because generative AI doesn't gain sentience or intelligence or consciousness because it's able to run faster. Generative AI is not to become an AGI, advanced artificial general intelligence, nor will it become the kind of artificial intelligence you've seen in science fiction. Ultra smart assistants like Jarvis from Iron Man will require a form of consciousness that no technology currently or may ever have, which is the ability to both process and understand information flawlessly and make decisions based on experience, which, if I haven't been clearly enough, are two entirely distinct things. Yeah, this is important. Processing information and decision based on prior experience are not the same thing. Generative AI is at best processes information when it trains on data, but there is no point does it learn or understand because everything it's doing is based on ingesting trained data and developing answers based on a mechanical sense of probability rather than any appreciation or comprehension of the material itself. LLMs are entirely different pieces of technology to that of artificial intelligence in the sense that the AI bubble is hyping, and it's disgraceful that the AI industry has taken so much money and attention with such a fragrant, offensive lie. Yeah, all those AIs gonna become a artificial general intelligence and kill us all was like actually hype to get you to invest in AIs and then call for regulations and make it all seem more sexy than it was. The job market isn't going to change because of generative AI because generative AI can't actually do that many jobs. It's mediocre at the few things that it's capable of doing. And while it's a very efficient tool, said efficiency is based off of technology that is extremely expensive. And I do believe at some point AI companies like Anthropic and OpenAI will have to increase prices or begin to collapse under the weight of the technology that has no path to profitability. If there's some secret way that this all gets fixed, wouldn't Microsoft or Meta or Google or Amazon, whose CEOs of AWS compared to generative AI hype to the dot-com bubble in February, have taken advantage of it? And why am I not hearing OpenAI is already trying to raise another multi-billion-dollar round after raising an immediate amount of $80 billion in valuation in February? Isn't its annualized review $3.4 billion? Why does it need more money? And I'll give you an educated guess, because whether they or the generative AI hoaxers today is obviously painfully not the future. Generative AI is not the future, but a regurgitation of the past. A useful but not yet groundbreaking way to completely generate new data from old that costs far too much to make the compute and energy demands worth it. Google grew its emissions by 48% in the last 5 years, chasing technology that made the search engine even worse than it already was with little to show for it. It is genuinely remarkable how many people have been won over by this remarkable con, this unscrupulous manipulation of capital markets, the media, and brainless executives disconnected from production. All just thanks to the tech industry that's disconnected itself from being useful technology. I've been asked a few times when I think what will burst this verbal, and I maintain that part of the collapse will be investor dissent, punishing one of the major providers, Microsoft or Google most likely, for a massive investment in an industry that produces little actual revenue. However, I think the collapse will be a succession of bad events, like the Figma pausing its AI feature after immediately plagiarizing Apple's weather app, like as a result of training data that it included it, crested One large one, such as a major AI company like chatbot Character AI, which raised $50 million in funding, the information claims might sell to the one big tech companies, collapsing under the weight of an unsustainable business model built on an unprofitable tech. Perhaps it's Cognition AI, the company that raised $175 million at $2 billion valuation in April to make an AI software engineer that was so good that it had to fake a demo of it completing software to development product on Upwork. Basically, there's going to be the moment that spooks the venture capital firms into pushing one of the startups to sell, or sudden, unexpected, but very obvious collapse of a major player. For OpenAI and Anthropic, there really is no path to profitability, and that includes one burning further billions of dollars in the hope that they discover anything that might be truly innovative or indicative of the future, rather than future iterations of generative AI, which at best are extremely expensive ways to process data. I see no situation where OpenAI and Anthropic continue to integrate large language models in perpetuity, such as Microsoft, Amazon, and Google are forced to decide that the cloud compute welfare isn't a business model. Without a real tangible breakthrough, one that would require them to leave the world of LLMs entirely, in my opinion, it is unclear how generative AI companies can survive. Generative AI is locked in a red crane's waist, burning money to make money in an attempt to prove that one day they will make more money, despite there being no clear path to doing so. I feel a little crazy every time I write one of these pieces because it's patently ridiculous. Generative AI is unprofitable, unsustainable, and fundamentally limited in ways it can do, thanks to the fact that it's probabilistically generating an answer. It's been 18 months since the bubble inflated, and since then there was very little actually happening involving the technology doing new stuff. Just iterative exploration of the very clear limits of what AI models can generate AI models that generate answers can produce, with the answer being something that is at times sort of good. It is obvious, well documented, generative AI costs far too much, it isn't getting cheaper, uses too much power, and doesn't do enough to justify its existence. There's no killer apps and no killer apps on the horizon, and there are no answers. I don't know why more people aren't saying this as loudly as they can, but I understand that big tech desperately needs this to be the next hype growth market because they haven't got any others. But pursuing this quasi-useful environment disaster-causing cloud efficiency boondoggle will send shockwaves through the industry, and it's a disgraceful waste. Ed Zitron. And I want to add to that. I've been talking about a lot why we're in a seemingly decadent cycle. And one of the things is we've been demanding growth for things that just can't continue to grow. You know, this idea of monotonic growth forever doesn't really work. And it's a massive energy and resource suck. But since people don't see how much energy and resources sucking on the consumer end, they don't really know. They're just hearing the hype. But we've heard the hype before, people. The capitalists are just looking for a way to keep making number go up, and they keep promising radical innovations in the market, and they don't really seem to be there. These are not useless technologies, but they're expensive technologies, and they are not anywhere near as productive as the expense would imply. Not good. Not good.